has two major concessions. One, leaving Iran with a vast nuclear program. And two, lifting the restrictions on that program in about a decade. That's why this deal is so bad. It doesn't block Iran's path to the bomb, it paves Iran's path to the bomb.
As far as I can tell, there was nothing new. On the core issue, which is how do we prevent Iran from obtaining a nuclear weapon, which would make it far more dangerous and would give it scope for even greater action in the region. The Prime Minister didn't offer any viable alternatives.
Historic day here in Washington. The president reacting to Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu's speech to a joint meeting of Congress. Let's bring in our panel. Steve Hayes, senior writer for the Weekly Standard, A.B. Stoddard, associate editor of The Hill, and syndicated columnist Charles Krauthammer. Steve, thoughts?
I think the big thrust of the speech from Netanyahu was, for 6 years, the Obama administration has tried to decouple the Iranian regime, the nature of the regime, the behavior of the regime, the support for terrorism, the repression of human rights, from the nuclear talks. And what Benjamin Netanyahu argued today, I think forcefully and persuasively, was you can't do that. What surprised me about the speech was just how blunt he was. I mean, at one point he said, many people believe that Iran can rejoin the community of nations. That is a line that's taken directly from Barack Obama's rhetoric. And Benjamin Netanyahu, in effect, said that is deeply naive to believe that. And I think the final point is if the point of the speech was to sort of reinvigorate a discussion or start a discussion about the threat that Iran poses, there's no question that the speech was a success. We've already had, in the 8 hours since he delivered the speech, a more sustained and meaningful debate about Iran as a threat than we have at any point in the 6 years of the Obama administration.
So on the substance, what about this Democratic pushback led by President Obama that there was nothing new there, no solutions, barring something that goes to war? How is that going to change the dynamic unless you're negotiating with Iran? That's their pushback.
I think I heard, you did hear today from Senator Dianne Feinstein. She said she is also opposed to the sunset clause. I think there are a lot of Democrats who are not saying that on the record, but are very concerned about that and other aspects of the deal. The sunset clause says the terms of the agreement only last 10 years, during which time, at which point Iran would feasibly have kept its structure in place and go back to enriching at levels they choose and be a powerful nuclear nation. So obviously, and even members of Congress until a few weeks ago thought that there was going to be no sunset, that this was going to be a deal in perpetuity. So there is a pushback about that. There is certainly pushback, again, that not a lot of them are talking on the record because this was a partisan, awkward situation they want to avoid discussing. They are going to join on the Corker-Menendez-Graham bill to insist that the deal come back to the Congress for 60-day review. But I spoke to a Democratic senator this afternoon who said, it is true that we, until we see the BB offer, that's the problem, was when President Obama, like I predicted he would, says just going back to sanctions leaves them on an unobstructed path, a faster path to a nuke. People believe that and they want something to counter it, and Netanyahu didn't offer specifics.
What counters that?
Well, I think what was implied in his speech, he wasn't going to go into a detailed agenda, was that you have to go back to the sanctions. You have to walk back the believable concessions the administration has made. You have to insist on no sunset clause, which I think was the main thrust of his speech. It was almost as if you don't have a sunset, meaning if you keep Iran under constraints until the regime is changed or changes its behavior, we could live with this. We're not going to like it. He said there are deals that we're not going to like, but we and the Gulf Arabs, the other Arabs, would be able to accept. So I think that's the counter. But I think Obama's response, there's nothing new here, was just a continuation of the pettiness of this, which actually it backfired, because the way that he dismissed Bibi, the way he and his minions have attacked him personally, has made this the biggest speech of the decade. It got infinitely more attention than it would have otherwise. In one sense, it was historic. It's the first time that Queen Esther has gotten a standing O in 2,000 years. In and of itself, quite remarkable. But in a way, it was Churchillian. I mean, not in delivery. It was not up to Bibi's norm. but in the sonorousness and the seriousness of what he said. And it was not Churchill of the 40s. This was the desperate Churchill of the 30s. And this was a speech of, I think, extraordinary power, but great desperation.
You know, Democrats, Steve, are using that charge, political theater, as a negative. But there was a interesting political theater in that it seemed on the television pretty compelling, at least when you talk to people around the country.
Yeah, the speech played well. It seemed to have played well in the chamber. And look, I think Democrats would rather focus on process here because they've avoided talking about the threat from Iran for so many years. These fouls that they keep crying about would mean a lot more if President Obama hadn't enlisted David Cameron, for instance, to call members of Congress, to lobby members of Congress on behalf of his agenda. Why shouldn't John Boehner be able to invite the Prime Minister of Israel to give a speech about the nature of the threat? And that, just to make one final point, that is what was new here. The framing of this was new. For 6 years, the Obama administration has talked about Iran as an opportunity. The speech we heard today talked about Iran as a threat. That's more in line with reality.
And one of the most powerful moments when Elie Wiesel stood up in the gallery, Holocaust survivors standing up in 2015 in the American House.